Hey there, folks. So today we're going to continue work on the apron. We are going to put the lead screw reverser mechanism together. We're going to put the handles on. We're going to put the hand wheel on. We're going to put the bearings that ride on the underside of the ways on. We'll put the threading dial on, and then we'll get the apron mounted up to the saddle. So let's get started with that. And again, if folks, if you have any comments or suggestions, let me know. Not a 10EE expert by any means, so I'm kind of learning as I go along here, and would appreciate any sort of advice. And hopefully we'll continue on here, and we'll get this thing to the point where in the next several videos we'll have it complete enough that we can put the tubes back in, go through some of the electrical, and then get this thing under power, and let's see how it runs. So I'm looking forward to that. I would say we're probably maybe 4 or 5 videos away from that. You know, I'll do that before I paint these back covers and the front covers. Just want to, you know, getting a little bit antsy to get this thing powered up and just see how it runs. I did test run it, as I mentioned before, when I first got it and when it was still in the factory where I found it, and it did run, but I had like literally 5 minutes to turn the power on, made sure it ran, and then snatched it away from the scrap heap. So it'll be really interesting to see how this thing works. Again, thanks. So appreciate you watching the video, and let's get started. All right, so now we're going to put in the reverser for the electric lead screw. So basically it mounts right here. This is the gadget here. So this right here goes through the front and hits this little block right here, which clamps on this and locks it in place. And I figured out what that little knob was. So this gear goes in here, and when you operate that knob, it is like a fine adjustment, because you know you have the blocks that you can loosen, like you have on a Bridgeport where you can stop the travel. So you can move those blocks, but then you can tweak this and do a little fine tuning with it. So I think that's pretty cool. So we'll get the gear in there. Okay, like that. We'll get a little bit of whey oil here, some in there. This thing, by the way, when I took it apart, was completely, I wouldn't say completely, it was very, very stiff. A lot of junk was in here. So that's this little fine adjustment that we talked about. Get a little bit more whey oil on there. Can't have too much. All right, so now we should be able to just flip this thing over, set it down on top of here. So right now we're going to put on the rollers that clamp the saddle carriage apron down to the ways. So this right here is the eccentric adjuster. You can see that machined like a cam. Bearing slides on there. So it goes in through the front, gets a spacer on it, and these are the bearings. So I got new bearings. So they're sealed bearings. And then we have a little snap ring that goes on there. So I'll tap those on, and then we'll bring it around to the front, and I'll show you how the adjuster goes on the front as well. So the best way I found to put these sort of snap rings on is to flip this thing down. This is the shaft. I think I showed you this a few minutes ago. So these things are just a, you know, you can't grab a hold of them with like pliers and or snap ring pliers and pull them apart. So the best thing to do that I found to put these guys back on. So I'm going to tip the apron up. It's out of the way. Going to get the shaft through there. All right, I gotta get a better angle here. Okay. Okay, so what we have done now is we have this supported, the shaft can't drop back down, so we have to put the spacer on there. Like that. Bearing goes down on there. Then we grab the snap ring, put that on there, and I just grab a socket like this. And let's just tap that thing on there. And I found light taps is not the solution here. Give it a good whack to get the thing seated over top of this shaft. Almost there. Okay, there we go. All right. All right, got it in there. Looks good. All right, tip this thing back up. So we'll get the lockdown screw started in here. Might have to chase these threads. It looks like there might be a little bit of paint in those threads. See what happens. Okay. That's a tight fit. Let's see if we get the teeth engaged first, and then we'll thread this lockdown screw in. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that at its lowest position for right now. Okay. All right, there's that one. And then we'll get the other one going here. All right, the next step is I'm going to clean up these two handles. One is for the, actually there's three handles. So this is for to engage the compound feed, carriage feed, and half nuts. So I'll get those cleaned up and then we'll throw those on. So these are the handles. So you see I have it marked carriage, and then this one I have marked cross slide. The reason why I did that is I found on the other lathe that I did is when they drill through these for the tapered pins, I think they may have drilled those in place. So if you put the wrong handle back on here, there's a good chance that the pins are not going to line up because they're not completely centered. So I fought that unbelievable with the other machine until I realized what was going on. So it was always good to, as you take these things off, to mark them so you know what goes where. So I'd rather put these on now than after I put the apron onto the saddle, and the reason for that is it's just a little bit easier to get to the tapered pins and knock them in. So you can see here the, all the, this is rust, this is some grease, oils. So I'll take these over and we'll polish them up and we'll bring you back. Here's this handle after polishing. So some people ask me, what's what the process is that I use, because you saw that, I mean, the grease is easy to get off, it's the rust that's the issue. These things, I believe, are probably chrome plated from the factory, but this end of this ball was rusty. So all I do basically is I run it through a wire wheel, then onto a Scotch-Brite wheel on a bench grinder, then I bring it over to the sort of cotton wheel on a polishing, like a Baldor, or actually I probably have an Eastwood polisher, with some compound. And you probably can't see it on camera, but there's some pitting here that I pretty much polished out, but it's still there. Over the long term, I think whatever, if it's nickel plated or chrome plated, I'm sure that plating has been damaged here. So I've been keeping a pretty decent, film of oil on this on my other one to make sure that, it doesn't rust in the future. But at some point probably needs to get replated. Or not, just use it. So yeah, that's what's going on. So I'm gonna slide this guy on and get it lined up with the pin there, for the tapered pin. And actually, I just see it, maybe these guys here, these pins were in the bag with these two knobs, and they are not tapered pins, they are roll pins. So I guess I didn't have to really worry about which side was the big side and the little side, so they're just straight through. Okay. All right, I'll get that other one polished up. Okay, so this one is back from polishing as well. It came out good. It's quite hot right now. All right, so that actually is quite loose, so we'll tighten it up. So I don't know the proper procedure for tightening this up. I just know when it's too loose, it comes all the way down and hits there. If you make it too tight, it doesn't feel like it locks in, it just stops. So if I push this down right now and I go right there, and it definitely stops, so I can feel the resistance. And this gear right up here is sliding into probably a clutch cone. And so that feels pretty good right there. So I like that. All right, so now let's line this one up. So you can see how this goes all the way down. Know that that's not right. So we'll just, I had these off to polish, so that's probably, and I don't know if they were adjusted properly to begin with anyway. So there, you see, that's too tight. I can't feel it lock into the detent. And here I could feel the resistance, and then it locks in. So I believe that that's where it should be adjusted to. Okay, so now this one right here, the half nut. I'll get you a little closer to this setup right here. All right, so what I'm doing here is getting that set screw in there. I'm not going to tighten it down yet because really the roll pin is what is going to determine its exact position. So we'll get this started. And we'll tap it in with the punch so we don't smash the new paint. Okay, so now I can go in and tighten this set screw. So this is feeling a little snug. So my guess is I've got a little paint buildup on this surface, and I'm just going to work it back and forth to see if that loosens up. If not, I'll just drive that pin back out and clean the paint off of it. But it's already loosening up, and I can see the paint starting to move away here, you know, like sort of chip away. Okay, so next thing we'll do is we'll put this handle on here. So a little update here, I'm trying to get this handle right on here, and what I ran into is this shaft wants to push in, and as I'm trying to push this handle in, it's pushing that. So I didn't want to have to take this off after I painted. I didn't realize that that was going to happen. So this gear right here engages to that gear, and that's what shifts the system to forward and reverse and off. So what I'll have to do is hold this thing back while I put the put this on here. So just trying to figure out the orientation, because you want it to be oriented so that you can get all the positions. So in other words, if I had this 180 degrees out of phase, I wouldn't be in the right spot with this handle relative to the detents that are here. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood where I need to be. So let's see here. So I can see there's where the grub screw hit, and this is where the roll pin goes, or the tapered pin goes. So obviously I can't get it up that far, so I have to come back down to this point, say right around there. And let's see if we can. It's a very tight fit. And I already have cleaned this off and deburred it, but it definitely is a tough fit on here. All right, so I'm gonna have to deburr that some more, I think. I'll get a small file. Okay, so I've got this in place. I put a tapered pin in there to hold it while I knock this roll pin in. So what I did was I ran a reamer, half-inch reamer through this handle, and I took a small flat file and I just cleaned off the any burrs that were on the shaft itself. So I know it's timed correctly because this grub screw mark is in the right spot, as well as the holes lining up for the pin. So I'm going to knock this pin in. That's going to push out the tapered pin that I just put in there temporarily. Okay, that was the tapered pin falling out. Okay. Looks pretty good. And let's tighten up that grub screw. All right. So now what we should be able to do is get this into here. And there's a grub screw that goes here that goes into here. And what that does is it locks this pin in, so it's just basically a spring-loaded knob you pull out to change positions. All right, so I got this off. What I was talking about before is you have this hole, which is supposed to line up with this threaded hole for the grub screw. And if I came in before, when this was assembled, I couldn't get that to line up. I couldn't push this knob in far enough. And what this thing does is it got a little pin right here and it locks into these notches. So what was happening was it was hitting and stopping before I could go any further. So what I'm going to have to do is line this up and get the screw locked in. So far it feels like it's in there. We'll see what happens here. Okay. Okay, so that's the detent, and if I do that, it seems to work. Seems to. I imagine with this lead in here, this should not be a big issue to get it over that. So again, let's go back to our timing of this, make sure we're not 180 degrees out of whack, and get this thing started on here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is make sure that we're lined up, and we are. Okay. So now if I pull this thing out, I should be able to bring it down far enough to get the roll pin in. So we'll stick the rod through. There's a keyway in this rod, there's a keyway right here, and of course then there's the keyway inside there. So let's see what's happening here. So what I'm looking for is that the keyway in this shaft is lining up. We knew it lined up with this one because there's a key on a bushing here and there's a key on a bushing here. Then the actuating part, the part that actually moves with that gear. So we got that lined up. All right, so now, okay. Locks in neutral. And forward or reverse, whichever one that's going to be. You can pull it back, locks in neutral. Okay. Okay, up next will be the threading dial. So you can see the top of this thing is pretty covered up with all kinds of buildup. You can't read the numbers. Down below you'll see the gears have a bunch of metal filings in them. The whole thing feels pretty gritty. So we'll just take a few minutes, clean this thing up, and get it ready to be installed. And again, just for a reminder, this is what it looks like. And we'll clean it up and I'll bring you back. So this is what it looks like after I cleaned it all up. I am inclined to not put grease. There would seem to be a lot of grease on these gears. I don't think that's a great idea. If you guys have a different opinion, please let me know, and it'd be interesting to see what the thoughts are. But it seems like the the grease definitely holds on to the metal shavings, and you know, probably causes more wear than it should. I'm just putting a little whey oil on here, and get that. Even like on this area right here where it mounts up underneath, I'll get some whey oil on there to stop any rust and stuff. So, as you can see right here, there's a hole cut out, or a little bore put in there for this pin. So this little guy comes up through the bottom here, right, and this screw right here with a locating pin goes in right there. Okay, what I did here, I cut out a bunch of video of my struggle to try and get this thing reassembled, and I was missing the point kind of how this thing works. So you see those 4 screw holes, the counterbore screw holes. So there's some socket head Allen screws that go down in there, and they capture this sort of clamshell, 2 halves of these brackets I'm showing you right there, and they fit into a groove that's machined into the threading dial housing. So what you do is you put those up under the underside of the saddle, you get those screws started in there, you leave it a little bit loose, then you take the threading dial housing with the little pin removed, that the pin you saw before with, you know, with the screw on it that goes into the housing to locate it. You remove that pin, so then you can rotate the entire housing to get the gears out of the way, so that you can slide the threading, the threaded shaft through there. You'll see a little bit later on in the video, I was struggling with trying to get the lead screw in there because the forward portion of it is not threaded, and so you can't get it past that in order to engage those threads. So I didn't realize that I needed to slide or rotate the threading dial out of the way, slide the lead screw in, and then swing it back into place radially, and then that pin that goes in from the front actually locates it properly. So you'll see that in a second. All right, so I carried this thing over here, and phew, it's heavy. So I have the rags down here, got it lined up here to some extent, and now. So what I'm working on here is I'm positioning the apron so that I can get it tight up against the underside of the saddle. So I use the threaded rods here. So in looking at this again, I think I could have done it installed it using the regular bolts. However, removing it was definitely easier with the threaded rod. So next time I'll do the bolts. So what I was saying before is when I took this thing off using the threaded rod arrangement, it was easier to do it that way and lower it down. I think putting it back in, even if I just got one to sort of locate it, is probably easier just to use these bolts to actually snug it up. You didn't see me install the gasket. I put a cork gasket in between the oil where it feeds up into the saddle. So what I'm going to do is get this thing sort of where it needs to be. And before I snug it all down and call it a day, I'm going to go just look through all my pile of junk to make sure I didn't forget anything, because I may have. Okay, so I'm going to clean up the rest of the bolts. I know it's secure, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not leaning into the frame at all, so this is in a safe place. I'll just check to make sure I've captured all the little bits and pieces that I would need to put on here first, and then I'll snug this down. All right, so let's get the hand wheel in. I just threw all those bolts in the top, so this is all secured down, and we'll get the hand wheel on. Okay, all right. And then I have my fastener that holds this guy in. And again, we're back with this little spanner wrench that I made. See if we can find a spot where I can actually get a little bit of a turn on it. Okay, so let's see how that feels pretty good. If you notice, you need a little bit of backlash, but not
Great,
really.
so again, thanks for watching. Going to keep on going. Next time around, we're going to be putting on the lead screw, the feed rod, and the on-off direction actuating rod. Thanks again. See you soon.